Okay, इंटर चेंज करते हैं. नेक्स्ट टू
हाँ ही चूना भी ना चेंज करना.
ठीक.
बस बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम करके ये लगे आवाज़ आवाज़ अच्छी तरह से आवाज़ से क्या है ये कल खुलेला है ठीक है माइक्रोफोन सही आहे ऑडियो स्टार्ट आहे 85 थी एंड आ गया सिक्योरिटी ऑटोमेटिक. Please, every student, please off your video. Everyone. So,
Hello. So every student has to
please turn off your video.
Turn off your videos.
Turn off your video and voice. Both.
Turn off your videos.
Mic. You must off your mic and video. Both. हम बंद कर सकते हैं तो भी एक्चुअली पार्टिसिपेंट्स ने म्यूट आ वीडियो जो क्लियर हो गया उनके
Video on it.
देन ही पास कर दी कभी हाँ जितने क्लियर हो गया सब स्टार्ट 71 100 से उसका बिस्मिल्लाह.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to discuss regarding the salivary glands. So, salivary gland. So the salivary gland consists of parotid gland, submandibular, and the sublingual. The largest gland is the parotid gland. So it is located in the compartment anterior to the ear and is invested by the that suspend the gland from the zygomatic arch. Now the parotid compartment contains the parotid gland, nerves, and the blood vessels. So lymphatic vessels and sometimes the gland itself. So the facial nerve, it can bisect the parotid gland into superficial and the deep lobe. Now the facial nerve runs on the superior to the mandible, it's anterior to the angle of jaw and the auricle, between the sternocleidomastoid muscles and the mandibular ramus. So these are the landmarks where the facial nerve is running over there. Now the relation above, it has the external auditory meatus and the temporomandibular joint. Below, posterior belly of the digastric, anteriorly mandible and the masseter muscles. Medially, it has the styloid process.
वैसे तो देखिए क्वेश्चन के फाइनल में फंडामेंटल एलिमेंट बचा है
And its muscles separate the gland from the internal jugular vein, internal carotid artery, and the last four canal nerves lateral wall of the pharynx. So if anybody has the questions regarding your topic, we will discuss on the last 10 minutes. In the last 10 minutes, there will be the question answer session. So in which I will entertain your questions as well. So the anatomy of the parotid duct. Parotid duct, it is located approximately 1 centimeter below the zygoma and it runs horizontally. It passes anteriorly and lies superficial to the masseter muscles and then penetrate the buccinator muscles to open intraorally. Now the parotid duct, it is 3 millimeter in diameter and the 6 centimeter in length. Now, the large superficial lobe and a small deep lobe that connect around the myloid muscles. Superficial lobe lies at the angle of the jaw, wedged with the mandible and the myloid and overlap the digastric muscles. In the diagram, you can see that these are the area where the facial nerve is lying and the parotid duct, which is going to lie between the muscles. The submandibular glands. Its relation superficially the skin, the platysma muscles, and the cervical conch of the facial nerve and the facial vein. Deep, it has the myloid for the most part, but posteriorly lie on the higher classes and comes in contact with the lingual and the hypoglossal nerve. Both nerves lie on the hypoglossal as they pass forward to the tongue. So these are the both nerves which lying in the submandibular gland. Now, the submandibular duct, this is also known as the Wathen's duct, passes forward along the superior surface of the myloid adjacent to the lingual nerve. It has 2 to 4 millimeter in diameter and about 5 centimeter in length. It opens into the floor of mouth through a punctum. Now, the punctum is a constructed portion of duct to limit the retrograde flow of bacteria laden to the oral fluids. So when you talk about the sublingual gland, it has the duct which is known as the Bartholin's duct. So one is the Bartholin's duct, another is the Bartholin duct. The Bartholin duct which is rising from the sublingual gland. In most cases, Bartholin duct consists of 8 to 20 smaller ducts of ravenous. These ducts are short and small in diameter. Sublingual glands. The duct either open individually into the floor of mouth near the punctum of Bartholin's duct on a crest of sublingual mucosa called the Pallica sublingualis. Now it opens directly into the Bartholin's duct. Physiology and the saliva content. Normally, the daily productions of saliva is 1 to 1.5 liter. It is most constituents of water. It has the organic compound which is known as the mucin, amylase, lysozyme, and it also consists of immunoglobulin A. Inorganic compounds, they have the bicarbonate, iodide, potassium, chloride, sodium, and the calcium phosphate, and other they are present in the salivary contents. Now, about 45% is produced by the parotid gland, saliva 45% by the submandibular gland, and 5% each from the sublingual and the mammary salivary glands. Saliva is produced at a low basal rate throughout the day, with flow increasing tenfold during meal. Now, saliva function is to maintain or lubricate the mucous membrane, and it can also help to clear the uh, food particles from the oral cavity towards the esophagus. Now, nerve supply, it is autonomic nervous system. It consists of parasympathetic stimulations, which have the watery saliva with a decrease in amylase in saliva and an increase in amylase in the serum. Parasympathetic interruption to salivary gland result in atrophy, while sympathetic interruptions does not cause a significant change. Now, the parasympathetic innervation in the case of parotid, parasympathetic innervation fiber originates from the glossopharyngeal nerve, while in the case of submandibular and the sublingual gland, the parasympathetic fibers comes from the facial nerve. Now, sympathetic innervations, when we talk about the sympathetic innervations, it can result in scant viscous saliva, rich in solutes with an increase in amylase in the saliva and no change in the amylase in the serum. For all of the salivary glands, these fibers originate in the superior cervical ganglia and travel with the arteries to reach the gland. The external carotid artery and the parotid. A lingual artery forms the submandibular and the facial artery in case sublingual gland. So these are the arterial supply of the investigations of the salivary glands. We talk about the ultrasound. Now it is non-invasive technique. It's mostly used in the deeply seated masses are the swellings which is arising from that
The Bluetooth device is
can
ready to
differentiate
pair.
between the solid and the cystic swellings. Now, this technique relies on the fact that different tissue densities result in different degrees of reflections or eco-productions of the beam. High frequency sound waves.
100 कहाँ होते हैं 100 में होते हैं अलग अलग
So, sorry for the interruptions. Now, the silography, it is the technique relies on the Retrograde injections of water-soluble radiopaque fillers, also known as the contrast medium, into the duct system of either the parotid or the submandibular salivary gland. A plan radiograph is made and the pattern of distribution of the contrast medium is assessed. Salography. It has like a sausage-like appearance of enlarged duct. So when there is a enlargement of the parotid duct, you can see in the salogram there is a sausage-like appearance of the enlarged parotid duct. CT scan is a cross-sectional radiograph imaging technique that is particularly useful in the evaluation of bone lesions. Not only the dynasty margins of the lesion in questions will be evaluated. This technique, having expansions on the fine internal details that can often more readily appreciated compared with the plain film. So use of contrast media is extended. The utility of technique in the areas of soft tissue pathologies when we talk about the CT scan. Now then we needle biopsy guided. In CT guided needle biopsy, you can uh, scan by implied difficult to reach the tumor margins by performing CT-guided needle biopsies, such as parapharyngeal spaces or the neoplasm present on the parapharyngeal spaces. In these areas, we can go through the CT-guided needle biopsy. Now, the CT salography, while often employed in the past, now it haven't the bigger advantages than the needle biopsies. These are the previously done this CT salography. Now it has the overcome by the MRI alone, and we can alter the management by performing the MRI. So MRI, the CT scan or MRI is useful for detecting the extent of large tumors and for evaluating the extraglandular extensions. Additionally, CT scan or MRI is helpful in distinguishing an intraparotid tumor or it can involve in the parapharyngeal spaces. So the tumor can evaluate from cervical lymph nodes, or we can assess the involvement of lymph node from where the metastasis is that should be ruled out. Now this is the MRI which shows the parotid duct. Now if there is an abnormality in the parotid duct, it can show the shadowing of that duct. Minus left gland neoplasms alternatively often are more difficult to assess on examinations, so you can use the preoperative CT scan or MRI for determining the extent of tumor, which otherwise is not clinically appreciable. Now, this is particularly apparent for the paranasal sinuses, salivary gland neoplasm, where the skull base or intracranial extensions may impact resectability. Now, radionuclide imaging. In this, we can rely on the uh, isotope scanning, in which the technetium 99 or p-technetium can demonstrate the area of high metabolic activity. So if the tumor cells are there, then there is a high activity of the metabolism is seen on these cells. Technetium 99 is a radioisotope that decay and emits a gamma ray. Half-life is 6 hours. It is useful in identifying the inflammatory conditions such as osteomyelitis, the area of skeletal lesions of the fibrous dysplasia, or metastatic diseases. Fine needle aspirations biopsy is performed using syringe with 20 gauge, and after local anesthesia, needle is advanced into the phalanx. Then we can have multiple pegs from there. Then the lung is activated to create a vacuum in the syringe, and is needle move back and forth throughout the masses. So in a single pick, we have to multiple movement of the needle on the multiple directions. Then we can maintain the pressure in the plunger, and then this is been used on the glass slide, and then it can be examined on histologically. Salochemistry, principally the concentration of sodium and potassium, which is normally changed with salivary flow rate. Any change in the concentration of electrolyte is indicative of salivary gland disease. Elevated sodium concentration with the decreased potassium concentrations is indicate the salidinitis. So Siloendoscopy. Now, the salivary gland endoscopic techniques open a new horizon in the field of salivary gland diseases. So, this is advanced technique in which the salivary gland stones and salinitis no longer are absolute indications for salivinotomy. The new techniques is siloendoscopy, diagnostic siloendoscopy, and the interventional siloendoscopy. Diagnostic siloendoscopy, we can perform it if we can see any lesion in the duct, when there's any structures or stone formations in the duct, we can identify on the diagnostic end. So if it is siloendoscopy is showing the dilatations of the duct, or there's a stenosis of the duct, you can see in the silography when the duct is stenosed, so it can indicate the part of the duct where it has been dilated and where the
बहुत
structural
गलत गलत
stenosis are
बहुत गलत दिया
there.
है। कैसे इसने जब तक सर पे डंडा नहीं पड़ेगा ना
Differential
कोई है ही नहीं वो।
diagnosis, chronic recurrent
तो
perioditis
बड़ा
and the Sjögren's syndrome. Now we talk about the salivary gland diseases. Salivary gland diseases, either it is a functional disorders, obstructive disorders, non-neoplastic and the neoplastic. So we will discuss the neoplastic lesions in the next lecture. Here we can discuss the functional disorders, obstructive disorders and the non-neoplastic as well. For the functional disorders, it has the siluria, increase in the saliva flow, psychosis, mental retardation, and certain neurological diseases such as rabies and the mercury poisoning. Now, xerostomia, decrease in the salivary flow. Now, the xerostomia is caused by mumps, Sjögren's syndrome, lupus, and the post-radiations, and it can also decreases when there's a post-surgical when there's a surgical trauma or post-surgical disorders. Functional disorders, it's mucosal and the ranula. Mucosal is secondary to trauma. 70% occurs in the lower lip. Now, X-ray biopsy is usually curative. Ranula, it is sublingual salivary gland mucosa. Treatment should include removal of the sublingual glands. So, we will talk about the ranula, it is a sublingual gland swellings. Mucus is exclusive secretory product of the accessory mammary glands and the most prominent productions of the sublingual gland. The mechanism for the mucus cavity development is extravasation or retention. Secondary to trauma, 70% occurs in the lower lip. So make sure that when you talk about the mucosal, means it mostly occurs in the lower lip and most the causes is secondary to the trauma. Mucosal extravasation is the leakage of fluid from the duct or acini into surrounding tissue. Extra outside means the vessels. Retention, narrow ductal opening that cannot adequately accommodate the exit of the saliva produced, leading to ductal dilatations in the surface of swelling, less common phenomenon. Leg acute epithelial lining. So when we talking about retention, so mucosal when the duct is narrowed, it can lead into the retention of mucus and it leads into formations of the cyst. Treatment of mucosal is excision with strict removal of associated minor salivary gland. So sometimes when we have the cyst over there, we have to remove the minor salivary gland as well. Avoid injury to other glands during primary nuclear. Ranula is a term used for mucosal that occurs in the floor of the mouth. When we talk about the ranula, means the swelling which is present on the floor of the mouth. The name is derived from the word rana because the swelling may resemble the translucent underbelly of the frog. So, we talk about the ranula, it derives from the rana. Ranula is present as a blue dome-shaped swelling in the floor of the mouth that tend to be larger than the mucosal and can fill the floor of the mouth and elevate the tongue. So located lateral to the midline, helping to distinguish it from the midline dermoids. So when we talk about the dermoids, it is a midline, but in the ranula, it forms at the floor of the mouth. Now, plumbing occurs when spilled mucin dissect through the myloid muscles and produce swelling in the neck. Concomitant floor of mouth swelling may or may not be visible. The treatment of ranula is mercilization or deroofing. We have to fallen into disfavor due to excessive recurrence rate of 60 to 90%. So mercilization, the recurrence rate is 60 to 90%. So sometimes we have to remove the sublingual gland as well for the intraoral approach. Now, if it's obstructive salivary gland disorders, we can, the major one is the salivary when there's a stones in the salivary gland duct. Salivary results in the mechanical obstructions of salivary gland. It's the major cause of unilateral diffuse parotid or submandibular gland swelling. Now, the exact pathology of salivary is unknown, but through an initial organic nidus that progressively grow by deposition of layer of inorganic or organic substances that may eventually obstruct the flow of saliva from the gland to the oral cavity. Now, hypercalcemia in a race only, xerostomia means tobacco, smoking, positive correlation, smoking has an increased cytotoxic effect on saliva and can decrease the nuclear cells phagocytosis ability and reduce the salivary protein. So they lead reduce the formation of the stone. Reasons salivary may occurs more often in the submandibular gland, more alkaline, higher concentration of calcium and phosphate in the saliva, higher mucus contents, longer curved duct, and the anti-gravity flow. Salivary obstructive phenomena acute ductal obstructions may occur at the meal time when the saliva produces at its maximum. The resultant swelling is sudden and can be painful. Sometimes patient complains that when he eats, he feels there's swelling below his jaw, and that should be a painful one. So gradually, the reduction of the swelling can result, but it recurs repeatedly when flows is stimulated. So the process may continue until complete obstructions or infections occurs. Salivary the high frequency of salivary in the submandibular gland is associated with several factors: the pH of saliva, submandibular gland, acidic and parotid gland, the viscosity of saliva, and the more mucus in the submandibular gland. And the anatomy of the Warthin's duct, the duct of submandibular salivary gland opening into the mouth at the site of lingual frenum is an uphill course, so stones are rarely found in the sublingual gland. So traditional treatment, we can do the sialolithotomy intraorally, or we can do sialoadenectomy through the external approaches. Now, organic composition of stones, they have the glycoproteins, mucopolysaccharides, bacteria, some cellular debris. Inorganic compound that contains the calcium carbonate, calcium phosphate, and sometimes it has the hydroxyapatite. Other characteristic deposits in similar chemical makeup. 80 to 90% of submandibular gland calculi are radio-opaque. When you're talking about the submandibular gland stones, they are radio-opaque. 50 to 80% of parotid calculus, they are the radiolucent. 30% of submandibular gland stones are multiple, and the 60% of parotid stones are multiple. Submandibular gland lithiasis diagnosis is clinical examination, clinical features, and the radiographic examination. Pain and sudden enlargement of gland when patient is eating. Now, palpation of stone in the submandibular duct. Then sometimes we can go through the radiographic appearance, salogram, then it can show 80% of the shadowing of the stones in the duct. Diagnostic plan occlusive film effective for the intraductal stones, while intraglandular radiation or small stones may be missed when you go for the radiographic appearance. Submandibular gland lithiasis treatment can be removed transferally if in duct and easily palpable. If in the gland or the gland is damaged, then the gland should be removed. So the traditional treatment, either you go for the intraoral route, sialoadenectomy, or through the external approaches. Manifestations: intermittent swelling of the gland when there's aggravated with taking food, or sometimes patient having the acute infections. Transoral or intraoral removal: indication of transoral removal, salivectomy. If a stone can be perforated through the mouth, it can be removed transorally, or if it can be visualized on a true central ocular radiograph, it can be removed transorally. Finally, if it is no further than 2 centimeters from the punctum, they can remove it transorally. The deeper submandibular stones, 15 to 20% stones may be removed through the salivary glands. Some surgeons can still remove transorally, but should be done through the general anesthesia. From the floor of the mouth, open opposite the first premolar, and the duct is dissected out. Then the lingual nerve is identified, and then duct open and stone is removed. So from the floor of mouth, most of the stones has been removed. Gland axion is indication when stones are posterior one, intraglandular stones are transoral approaches failed. Gland axial sialoadenectomy. While some believe that a gland with sialoadenectomy no longer functions, a recent study on submandibular glands removed due to sialoadenectomy found there was no correlation between the degree of gland alterations and the number of infection episodes. So 50% of glands were histopathologically normal, and they are close to normal. A conservative approach to the gland or stone seems to be justified. Salivary gland infections: acute bacterial salivinitis, chronic bacterial salivinitis, and sometimes there is a viral infections. Mostly it is caused by the mumps. Salivinitis: acute infection more often affects the major glands than the minor glands. Pathogenesis: retrograde contaminations of the salivary duct and parenchymal tissues by bacteria inhabiting the oral. Stasis of the salivary flow through the duct and the parenchyma promote acute suppurative infections. Acute suppurative infections that are common in the parotid gland that leads into the parotitis, and mostly they are the viral caused by the mumps and the pyogenic parotitis. The etiologic factors most associated with the entities retrograde infection from the mouth. Systemic dehydration, it can lead to chronic immunocompromise. Sometimes it leads to liver failure, renal failure, and the hypothyroidism. Usually debilitated, bedridden, malnourished, and dehydrated patients. Risk factors, they may also promote into neoplasm, selectasis, and extreme of edges and poor hygiene that also leads to calcular formation and the ductal structures. There must be other factors. Sialotasis can produce mechanical obstructions of the duct, resulting in salivary stasis and subsequent gland infections. Calculus formations in the submandibular glands: 85 to 90% of salivary calculi in the submandibular gland. However, the parotid gland remains the most on the acute suppurative infections. The acute suppurative parotitis: sudden onset of erythematous swelling on the post or preauricular area, extending into the angle of the mandible. Male, they have 60% affected more than the female. It is caused by Staph aureus, is the most causative organism. So when we're talking about the bacterial parotitis, so it is mostly caused by Staph aureus. It can lead to decreased salivary flow. Clinical presentation: rapid onset of preauricular swelling, erythema, pain, palpation of the involved gland will reveal a no flow or less thick purulent discharge from the orifices of the duct. Purulent saliva should be sent for culture within the most common organisms: Staph aureus, Streptococcus pneumonia, and Streptococcus pyogenes. Sometimes it's also caused by H1 influenza. Lab testing: parotitis is generally a clinical diagnosis. However, a critical ill patient, they can diagnose if no response to antibiotics, we can go through the MRI, CT, ultrasound to exclude the abscess formations. Can perform needle aspirations as well if we can find that abscess is there. Treatment is symptomatic and supportive care, intravenous split, warm compressions, and maximize the oral hygiene. Give Uh, lemon drops external salivary glands massage if tolerated. Treatment antibiotics 70% of organisms with beta lactamase penicillinase sometimes need beta lactam inhibitors like augmentin, sometimes go for the cephalosporins. Differential diagnosis tumors in the sublingual gland, tumor in the submandibular gland, spas infections in the submandibular region, and lymphadenopathy. Now, the minor salivary glands. From 600 to 1000 minor salivary glands, they are located throughout the paranasal sinuses, nasal cavity, oral mucosa, hard and soft palate, pharynx, and the larynx. Each gland is through secretory unit with its own duct and opening into the oral cavity. So this is about all about the salivary gland, inflammatory disorders, and the anatomy and the functions of the salivary gland. Question. So in the next, you can we will go through the tumors of the salivary gland. So if anybody have any questions, you can ask regarding this topic.
One by one, ask.
Any query regarding this topic, regarding the salivary gland, its anatomy, physiology, and regarding its disorders?